First of all, I want to thank all the panelists for being here. This is not an easy discussion, but it's a necessary discussion that we are all looking forward to having together collaboratively. There are a few ground rules that we want to talk about before we start for audience members. We do welcome audience participation, but in only one way. Tonight, you guys are going to be active listeners, and being an active listener is actually a form of participation. So we're going to ask that you set aside your biases and actively listen to what each panelist is saying with an open mind, and then see where that leads you by the end of the discussion. I also want to say I'm really proud to be part of a community, including the university, who's courageous enough to show up to this, to be vulnerable, and to be seen by the public. And the fact that we've all come together feels like a really important starting point of collaboration. So in an effort to keep this a balanced discussion, we are fortunate to have Bryn Malloy from the UM Athletic Department here to serve as a co-moderator. And I just have to say that Bryn is a listener, she is a leader, and she's an incredibly positive force for our community and the university. So I will let Bryn introduce herself.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. A little bit about myself. I am the Assistant Athletic Director for Marketing and Community Relations in the Athletic Department. I was lucky enough to be an undergrad student at the University of Montana, and while I got my master's from the University of Washington, I have been working in athletics ever since I graduated here. So with that, I will go ahead and get started introducing our panelists, and we'll start with Drew Calling. She's MS, LCP, PC, UM Campus Assault Prevention Coordinator, and the Director of the Student Advocacy Resource Center. Ms. Calling leads the sexual assault prevention efforts on the UM campus. One of the primary prevention efforts involves training, both in person and online, of all UM incoming students, which is more than 3,000, and online refresher training for all juniors. Ms. Calling also leads the direct services that are provided to students who have experienced sexual assault and/or domestic violence. These services include first response 24/7 in partnership with the YWCA, counseling for victims and their friends and families, advocacy in educational, medical, legal, Title IX ways, connections to resources and supports, other individualized services based on students' needs, and the 24/7 telephone helpline available to support students with suicidal ideation, intervention, referrals for support with mental health issues, help with problem-solving challenges students face, or simply offering a caring listening ear. External to UM, SARC maintains a close collaboration with other community service providers, and she has a strong partnership with law enforcement, the County Attorney's Office, and the UM Title IX Office to collectively improve reporting responses for victims of sexual assault. She has worked with agencies across Montana to strengthen culturally appropriate responses in rural and tribal communities. She is committed to making the UM campus a safe and welcoming place for all students to pursue their educational goals and dreams. Drew Calling.
Now that I've had a seat, I'm going to stay seated. It's going to be easier to flip through. We also have Kent Haslam, who is the athletic director for the University of Montana, is one of our panelists. Kent was named the 17th Director of Athletics at the University of Montana on September 17th, 2012. He began his career at Montana in January 2006 as the Associate Director of Athletics for Development. Prior to arriving at Montana in early 2006, Kent worked as the Associate Director of Athletics for External Operations at Northern Arizona University, and he was hired at NAU in May of 2000. Prior to his time at NAU, Kent's diverse career in sports included positions in professional baseball and a management role at the 2002 Olympic Winter Games in Salt Lake City. So you probably have a deep appreciation for what just went down. Kent is a 1993 graduate of BYU with a degree in broadcast journalism and Japanese. He earned his master's degree in educational leadership from NAU in May 2004. Kent and his wife Holly have 5 children. Thank you, Kent.
Lisa Davey, the creator of the online petition opposing the hiring of Coach Houck. Lisa Davey is a 5th-generation Montanan and Missoula native who has taken an active role in our community, starting as a youth committee member for Mayor Mike Cadiz, the former Forum for Children and Youth, and the MCAPS School Board. As an adult, she has served on several nonprofit boards, multiple state advisory committees, and as a Montana delegate to the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs. In 2014, Lisa left her role as Director of Health Programs for Parents, Let's Unite for Kids, to return to the University of Montana to finish a BA in Communication. She is currently a graduate student at the University of Montana, finishing a master's in communication focused on rhetoric. As a student, she taught public speaking and served a term as an ASUM graduate student at large for the Publication Board, which oversees the Kaiman, and as an alternate graduate student at large for the Student Conduct Committee. She currently serves on the University Council on Student Assault and is an active member with several roles in Missoula Rises.
And on our panel tonight, we also have Bobby Hauk, who is the head football coach for the University of Montana Grizzly football program. Bobby Hauk returned to Montana as the head football coach in December 2017. 2018 will mark Bobby's 30th year coaching college football, with 7 spent as Montana's head coach from 2003 to 2009. Coach Hauk earned a bachelor's degree from Montana and a master's degree from UCLA, and he has worked at Washington, Colorado, UCLA, and NAU. Thank you, Coach Hauk, for being here.
Also on our panel, Chantel Gaynor, the Director of the Missoula City-County Relationship Violence Services. Chantel has worked in the field of sexual and domestic violence prevention and intervention for the past 2 decades. In 2002, she was hired by the University of Montana to develop the very first primary prevention programming on campus. Additionally, she has served as a trainer and prevention specialist in Missoula County's rural communities. As the Director of the Missoula City-County Relationship Violence Services, Chantel provides direct advocacy services, coordination of the community response to this violence, professional training, and primary prevention programs throughout Missoula County. Chantel.
And as our final panelist, we're very pleased to have with us Seth Bodnar, President of the University of Montana. Seth became the 19th President of the University of Montana on January 2nd, 2018. He is an innovative and collaborative leader with a track record of success in building effective teams and helping people and organizations reach their full potential. Seth has deep roots in education and firmly believes in the power of higher education to transform lives and communities. Seth graduated first in his class from West Point, received both the Rhodes and Truman Scholarships, and earned 2 master's degrees from the University of Oxford. Seth continues to serve as an Army Reserve officer and a visiting faculty member at West Point, and he is also a board member of the Positivity Project, a nonprofit organization focused on character education. Before coming to the University of Montana, Seth was a senior executive at the General Electric Company. Seth's love for Montana bloomed while studying at Oxford, where he met fellow Rhodes Scholar and his future wife, Chelsea Elander, a 5th-generation Montanan and native of Missoula. Chelsea is a pediatrician and a graduate of Hellgate High School, MSU Bozeman, Oxford, and Harvard Medical School. Seth and Chelsea have 3 children. Thank you for being here. And then we have one other special guest who is out in the audience, Dr. Christine Fiore, PhD. We actually will be asking her to speak to some issues tonight, so we're going to be handing her a wireless mic at some point in the evening. Dr. Fiore is a professor and chair of psychology and has been at the University of Montana since 1992. Her research and teaching interests include violence against women. In 2012 to 2013, as a leadership fellow with President Engstrom, she participated in the university's response to the DOE and DOJ. As a continued component of her work, she developed with national consultants and administered the Campus Climate Survey, as well as other focus groups regarding campus sexual violence. We're very pleased to have you here, and we are going to be talking with you about some of those issues specifically.
All right, we'll go ahead and get this going. And as Erin mentioned, this is just a great discussion, important conversation for us to have. So with that, let's start with some context as to how and why we are here tonight. Lisa, can you tell us what petition you started and how it brought us to this point?
Yeah, thanks, Bryn. After seeing some online posts that Bobby Hauk might be coming back, I initially thought that it was just very unlikely. I didn't see the university wanting to go backward. And then I read that he had been interviewed. And so I posted the link to the journalism article that said he had been interviewed on Facebook. You guys all probably share a few posts every day. But what was unique about this was immediately people started to contact me. I got a lot of private messages and I got a lot of comments in the span of about 10 minutes. And it was really clear to me that I was not the only one who was concerned by the university making this choice. A very small group of us met online and talked about how we wanted the university to hear that we were concerned and that we had community concerns. I agreed to write and submit the online petition and then be the head person for communicating with the university. I think that's good.
What were your specific concerns regarding the rehiring of Coach Hauk?
I grew up in Missoula, and I grew up watching the Grizz. I think my really big concerns were that I was a traditional undergraduate student at the University of Montana the first time that Bobby was coach here. And so I knew what it felt like to be a student on that campus. And then for those of you posting online and thinking this is just me making it up or me with no facts, I think there's a really clear body of evidence that the team was not well controlled last time Bobby was here. There were numerous arrests. There were 12 arrests during his tenure that included things like throwing bottles at bars, which maybe you could write off as some college behavior, although not behavior I think we want our role models to be demonstrating. But that included things like pointing a gun at a woman's head and slapping her while he was trying to collect a debt, and later pleading guilty to misdemeanor for partner assault. Or slapping a woman outside a downtown bar, strangling his girlfriend, and striking her on the head. Or when they attacked a student outside of a dormitory, leaving him with a fractured jaw, a concussion, and chipped teeth. One of those 3 students was later convicted of assaulting a second student when he violated his terms. I think for me the really big problem, other than those obvious partner assaults, was also how Hauk dealt with the press, and particularly with student reporters. When you're a role model on campus in charge of students, I find it completely unacceptable to swear at them and put them down when they're asking you about player behavior. So it was really clear to me after ESPN picked up the story, and certainly national opinion weighed in and called him a bully, that he was not interested in figuring out how to fix the problem or look for solutions. He was mostly interested in evading it.
Okay, so Kent, in light of what you have heard Lisa just outline in terms of the body of evidence that she has put forth, as well as other community perceptions, were you aware of those community concerns when you sought to rehire Coach Hauk?
Well, I learned quickly that there was no lack of opinion on whoever I hired as the head football coach. Hiring a head coach in particular with a high-profile sport like football, everyone has got advice for you. Everyone has an opinion on where you should go, and I knew there was no middle ground with Bobby, but from my perspective, there was overwhelming support for him as well. But I knew that there would be challenges, things that we'd have to talk through, things that we'd have to work through, things that we'd have to discuss. And we addressed this in the opening press conference a couple of different times, but it bears repeating that we had very candid conversations about dealing with the media, about developing leaders, and I felt very comfortable with Bobby's approach, with the way that he handled himself. When he was here before, there was an image that he was too tough, that he was too disciplined, that he ran too tight of a ship at times. And so working through that was certainly part of that interview process. But I heard the dialogue. I definitely heard people's feedback. I heard from Lisa, I heard from a number of different people, and knew going in there was no middle ground here, but felt like that hiring him was a great step forward for where we wanted to take the university. I really felt like we got an older and more mature, sorry to say that, Coach Howe, older head coach, one that had gone on and been a head coach at another university and worked for a very, very well-respected athletic director in Jim Livengood, that then went to San Diego State and worked for just legendary head coach in Rocky Long and had great success. And I felt strongly that getting somebody back who really knew what it was like to sit in that head coaching chair, it's a unique job. And when you hire a head coach, you want to remove as many unknowns as you can. And he knows what it's like to be the head football coach at the University of Montana. It's a unique place. It's like no other.
Okay, so what I've heard you say is that when you hired him through the interview process, you did have a conversation about all of those concerns, and you listened and you took into account the community concerns. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So then, in addition to that, did you, at the time that you hired Coach Hauk as the athletic director, did you have a plan to address public concerns while at the same time ensuring that Coach Hauk would be set up for success in his new position?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think that this forum right here is a good opportunity for that type of a discussion. And Bobby's support network is very deep rooted in this community, in this state. So I knew he'd have great support from that standpoint, and that was overwhelming, that response coming back from people. But you bet, we talked about this is a very different place than even in 2009 when he left. It's been 9 years almost, and so a lot of those discussions and a lot of those things took place.
Thank you. All right, so before we go much further, now we've set the context for how we ended up here, even though it's a much broader, bigger discussion that we have, so we're gonna get into that bigger discussion. We will be using terminology that some of the community may not be wholly familiar with, and there are some concepts that should be addressed by one of our experts on the panel. Chantel, the term toxic masculinity has been thrown around quite a bit prior to this panel taking place. Will you tell us what that term means?
To the best of my ability. However, I'm not the end-all be-all, so feel free to Google and check my work. So toxic masculinity is really a concept that some behaviors that we ascribe to masculinity can become harmful in the extreme. And an example I'm going to share is actually from my dad. So one thing that we love in masculinity is self-reliance and the ability to take care of yourself. One day, my dad was out back, and he tripped in a gopher hole, fell down, and really hurt his neck, and he knew he was really hurt. He chose to crawl through his backyard, through his house, roll himself down his front steps, crawl to his truck, hoist himself up, and then drive to the VA to get seen. Well, he had broken a vertebrae in his neck, and his doctor told him if he would have jiggled one way or hit a bump on the road another way, that break would have been catastrophic. He would have been instantly paralyzed, and if that happened while he was driving, he would have killed somebody and possibly himself in the process. So toxic masculinity is the part where self-reliance became a danger to himself and somebody else. And we see this when it might be an insult, and rather than maybe saying, I disagree with you and walking away, it becomes I throw a punch. Toxic masculinity can be divisive, however, because it really is a term that talks about men's behavior in a particular way. And anytime a group is put in the spotlight like that, you can become defensive. And we know this through all kinds of different ways that language gets used to talk about certain groups. There are some great ways of pivoting off of that and moving conversations to be positive, inclusive, and empowering. And so in talking about what is harmful behavior is good, to say that only men participate is probably not good.
All right, from your professional experience, what are the antidotes to toxic masculinity?
it's building healthy relationships and healthy communication. And we know that for anybody who's ever seen little boys idolize bigger boys, and those bigger boys idolize even bigger boys, we know that kids look up. And when we've got healthy mentors in place, when we've got healthy role models in place, when we've got folks who interrupt low-level problematic behavior and redirect, all of those things lead to healthy communication and healthy relationships. And that's the thing that really unplugs the toxic in the masculinity and gets us to the good stuff of leadership and positive mentoring and self-reliance in the good way, not in the drive yourself to the hospital when you're broken way.
Thank you, and I just want to reiterate here. So when you hear that, since we're all being active listeners tonight, when you hear the term toxic masculinity, it does not mean that we're man haters or that women hate men. It means that the antidote, as Chantel said, is that we want to try and foster and build those healthy relationships for men to be able to succeed in a healthy way. So Drew, I'm going to throw it over to you now. Is it accurate, oh, sorry, wrong question. Drew, the term rape culture has also been used, and unfortunately, whether it's right or wrong, has been applied to the University of Montana in the past. First, can you tell us exactly what the term rape culture entails?
Yeah, so when I think about rape culture, I think about it in terms of societal attitudes and behaviors, right? Kind of what Chantel was talking about, that can create an environment that is oppressive to certain groups, right? So these can be societal attitudes, and examples that we use in the training that we do with our students could be victim blaming, right? So if somebody reports or discloses that they've experienced sexual assault, that the response is then therefore to blame the victim. So that is a symptom of rape culture. Objectification or sexual objectification of women, making small of, when someone comes forward and says, this is my experience, I've experienced sexual assault, and then we belittle them, we make light of it, we joke, we mock it, we don't take it seriously. That is a symptom of rape culture. And then the denial that rape is a problem in our culture is also a big piece of this broader context of rape culture, right? And so really it's a multitude of attitudes and beliefs that therefore can create environments where rape is not only tolerated, it's condoned and encouraged, right? And so we've seen this as, a national issue and a global issue, right? Rape culture is just, unfortunately, really pervasive nationally and culturally. And to me, in order to address rape culture, and what we teach our students is that it takes every single one of us working shoulder to shoulder. And when we hear comments, when we see actions that feed into these myths or put one group down, that we step in, that we say something, that we intervene, and that we ourselves become informed, right? It's important. Knowledge is power. We tell our students that all the time, so I encourage everyone to get informed about this so that when you hear this in your everyday life, that you therefore can be that, bystander and say, this is my experience. Can I tell you about, why what you said, is incorrect, and let me give you the correct information.
Okay, so in listening to that, would it be fair to say that rape culture is in fact not specific to the university, correct?
That is very correct.
Okay.
And I would say, like I said again, it's a societal issue, right? And so when you think about it, our students are coming from a broader culture. So by the time our students come to us, sometimes they're 18, 19, 20, 30, you know, and they've been brought up in this culture, receiving, you know, these messages throughout their whole lives, right? It's just endemic in our popular culture, in our music, in images, in, you know, it's just so widespread. And so, you know, by the time we get our students, you know, they've been enculturated in rape culture.
So really, community members, those of you who are not university students who are getting singled out with that, at the University of Montana, it's imperative that, like Drew said, we really do educate ourselves and understand how we as a community can work together to start to dismantle that rape culture for our kids that are then attending the university. So it's really as we hear, a community-wide issue that we all need to take ownership of and be responsible for. Okay, Coach Hauk, so in hearing all of this, tell us how you, so in light of what you've just heard from Chantel and from Drew, tell us how you see your role as a coach to these student athletes. You've been hired to do a job, and that necessarily includes creating a winning football program. How do you specifically balance the demands to win versus ensuring each student athlete is receiving the whole university experience?
Yeah, that's a pretty multifaceted question there. Coaches fill many roles, okay? Educator, mentor, role model, disciplinarian, father figure, confidant, all those things. And it differs by student athlete. Each one needs something else from us, and we have to try to help them in their journey to growing as best we can. You know, in terms of their university experience versus their athletic experience, there are a couple different things. You know, we want our student athletes to be active members of the campus community and active members of the community at large. And we want them to engage the other students. We want them to be involved. We want everybody to be a part of it, feel good about it, feel like that it's a family business, and the family is our student body. And that's been expressed to our team repeatedly over the years, as recently as last Friday in our team meeting. The other part, and I mean, we have an associate athletic director in Bryn, who one of her major jobs is community relations, and we want our guys to be out in the community. We want them heavily involved, in fact, to the point where we require them to do a number of those. And then the last part of your question was, how do we make sure they have the college experience? We want them to have a great college experience. We want them to enjoy being college students. We want them to get their degree first and foremost, but their experience is going to be different than a student that's not playing our game. And our game in particular is very demanding, it's very encompassing, and when they make the choice to be a college Division I college football player, they're making a choice to give up some of that. I mean, they have way more structure, they have way more requirement on their time, and many of them need it, but you know, they don't have the same life on campus from a freedom standpoint as a regular student. But we want them heavily immersed, heavily involved, heavily engaged in both the community and the campus.
Okay, so having a winning football team with those players is not mutually exclusive from helping those players become a whole person while they're at the university, correct?
No, it's absolutely not. I mean, it's why, you know, my memories of this place are the football Saturdays are the greatest days of the year on campus, and people coming from around the state enjoy it. We can encourage that, and we want people to have fun. We want this to be a great experience, and for our players, we want that. But, you know, ultimately, they're putting in all that time I just spoke of a minute ago. The object is, when we get a chance to compete, we compete to win. And by learning how to do those things and going to the interaction part, competing, going through some trials in terms of what's required of them to give of themselves for the benefit of the football program, the university, they have to sacrifice a lot of their personal time, their freedom, their effort, their sweat. We have an aggressive game, and they have to sacrifice some of that. And part of that, the enjoyment in that is beating the opponent who's trying to do the same thing.
You know, I think this is I think this is a really important point, and I think, you know, I'm his boss. And so you say, how do you balance these competing imperatives? I think many of you have seen, I know there's some Grizz fans in the audience, so I don't want to have any tomatoes thrown at me when I say this, but the point of our athletics programs, it's not to win games. It's not. These are key ways to enhance the development of the young women and men who participate in these sports. Ultimately, athletics are about building leadership, character traits, teamwork. The good news is, so I'm glad you didn't throw any tomatoes yet, is when you focus on that, wins follow. When you focus on wins to the detraction of the other piece, then you get into problems. But I've been very clear, as Kent's supervisor, as Bobby's, that the expectations of our athletics programs are that they are an enhancement of the student experience for those who participate in intercollegiate athletics. They build these important traits that will serve these young women and men over the course of their lifetime. Some of them we hope to see on TV playing someday, but even those that do, they'll play for a few years and then they'll go on to other careers. And these are important ways for them to develop as human beings and as leaders. And that's what our athletics programs are for.
Well,
Okay, so,
I would piggyback on that, Aaron, real quick, and this is sort of an answer to a different question probably, but to piggyback on what Seth just said, I mean, the reason I coach, the reason I've done it for going on 30 years, which is hard to spit out at times, but is I want to develop men of character, people that are great husbands, fathers, great in the community, basically successful in life, hopefully financially including that. But we try to give them the background to be all of those things. That's why we do what we do. There are easier ways to make a living.
So let's get real about this. Here's a question for you then. In light of what you've just heard your new boss say, is it realistic to have a successful winning football team when you prioritize what President Bodnar has just set forth?
Well, first, that's not the first time I've heard him say it, and it's easy to work for a guy who you agree with 100%, which is the case, and certainly we've done that before here.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about your role as you described it, mentor, father figure, role model for the student athletes. Clearly in Missoula, the fans love their Grizz football, and we've seen that fan behavior sometimes shift into what I would call hero worship of these young student athletes. You know, these are men who are 18, 19, 20 years old, and this can lead to a perception of entitlement by the larger community. So what are you doing specifically to help these young men navigate this local fame while ensuring that they're not falling into a narrative of entitlement?
Right, and I think entitlement's a problem with the generation that we're working with in general, not just our athletes and our student athletes, but you know, we hold them to a really high standard, a very, very high standard and a high level of accountability. And you know, when we recruit them, we express to them that the scrutiny will be intense and they can't come here if they don't expect that or can handle it. But you know, when we were here before, you know, as Kent mentioned, over a 7-year span, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of student athletes come through our program. And did everybody do everything right? No, they did not. I've said that many times, but they're always held to a high level of accountability. That would be unfactual to say they're not. And they were, and they will continue to be. But to piggyback on that, again, we want them to be engaged members of the campus community. We want them to be out there in the Missoula community, someone people can take pride in for what they bring to this town and this university. And as I said, there have been hundreds and hundreds of people that have come through our program and will attribute their successes and all the great things they've done, whether it's doctors, lawyers, attorneys, accountants, physical therapists, pharmacists. We've had them all through our program, and the vast majority of them will attribute the success they've had later in life, who they are as husbands, fathers, community leaders, to their experience and what they were asked of as being Grizzly football players.
Okay, so I will follow that up with another question. When I hear you say that you're helping them learn how to become good members of our society. Specifically, you've mentioned being good fathers, good husbands, twice now. So to that end, how do you specifically set the tone for your student athletes that demands a culture of respect for women and for other vulnerable groups?
We have a significant amount of training that goes on campus, starting as they enter school and continuing on through their time on campus. And I can list it for you if need be, or Drew can, because she's certainly the expert in that. But beyond that, I mean, they get extensive training, but I would say that one, they act appropriately. Two, they step up and act if they see something wrong going on. And then the third thing that we've been doing since the early 2000s is participating with our SARC group and other groups in awareness type formats. And I've got a list of those that I could run off for you too, that are ongoing, upcoming, and have been going on. I mean, I've got an extensive list of those. We've got the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which is Miss Jean's group, and it's an athlete group that takes a leadership role in our department. They've created a video that it's called the It's On Us campaign. The video is completed, done by student athletes from start to finish. It includes student athletes, Spirit Squad, SARC advocates, and Greek life. SARC created another video on sexual assault prevention, working closely with SARC. Both videos are posted on our athletics website. During this past summer meeting, the conference Student Athlete Advisory Committee has adopted sexual assault prevention as its focus the next 2 years. Each institution's SAC will develop initiatives surrounding this issue. SAC did a bake sale, cupcake sale at the UC on November 30th with a portion of proceeds donated to SARC, Drew's group. Women's basketball game on February 15th. Game tickets were $125. Bins at the ticket window to donate change to SARC. And then men's game on this coming March 3rd will be the purple and teal game. It's hashtag set the expectation. Purple's the awareness color of relationship violence, and teal is for sexual assault. Players are wearing purple and teal shoelaces. SARC and SAC members will host tables in the lobby with educational materials, so on and so forth. And then we always use different educational opportunities as they come available with our team, and have for a long time.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a pretty comprehensive approach, and we are going to ask Drew to speak specifically a little bit later about what SARC is doing, because I understand there's some very proactive and amazing work that you are heading up for student athletes, right? Okay, so we will get to that, but I'm just going to dig in just a little bit deeper with you, Bobby, before we move on to another panelist. So I hear you saying that there is training and education that's available, or actually required, of the student athletes, correct?
That's correct.
On sexual assault prevention?
Both NCAA and University of Montana. Yes,
Okay.
generally.
Okay, so here's my question for you specifically. So it's not in terms of like what SARC is doing or the university, but for you specifically as the coach. How do you stay committed to the training that's provided and that message, even when it may disrupt team cohesion?
I don't know how it disrupts team cohesion.
Okay, I'm going to give you an example.
Go ahead.
So here's one, and if
It
this,
shouldn't.
Okay, that's good. That's good to start off with that. But I'm going to give you this example, and then we'll sort of walk through this. So in terms of, like for instance, locker room talk. Okay, so what would be deemed appropriate locker room talk from your perspective?
You know, that's a hypothetical question. I
Okay.
don't think it's productive to deal in that.
Okay,
But there are procedures in place on our campus to handle almost every eventuality in terms of sexual assault.
okay. So I'm going to ask you more specifically, if you're in, the locker room and you hear your student athletes using terms that would be derogatory towards women, I mean, certainly that would be undermining the work that SARC is doing. How do you deal with that as a coach?
Tell them to stop.
Okay, so full stop, not appropriate.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't.
Okay, and I don't know.
Again, we're educators.
Right.
They're not going to do everything right all the time, but we're going to educate them. We're going to hold them accountable when they do things wrong, and when they do things right, we're going to praise them.
Okay, so that's good to hear you say that. You set the tone consistently for your team in
Yeah,
that respect.
And the misnomer would be that we're, as coaches, we're some omnipotent force that controls everything they do 24 hours a day. We don't. We try to educate them. We try to mentor them. And when they do things right, we praise them, and when they do things wrong, we hold them accountable.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you for your candid answers.
You bet.
And for educating us. That's good for us to know. President Bodnar, I have a few questions for you just to follow up on that. So based on what you said to us earlier about the point of the athletics programs is not to win, but you talked about the whole student, right? Is there significance in setting the expectation and standard that students are there for the whole university experience and not brought to U of M strictly to create a winning football program? What's the significance of that?
I think it's hugely significant. I mean, I think, and when I see parents that are bringing their daughter, their son to the University of Montana, obviously they're excited about their daughter's opportunity to play volleyball. But they're probably not going to go to the beach volleyball tour. They are mostly excited that their daughter's going to be set up for success over their entire career. And I want those parents, I played Division I athletics, and I was never making it to the major leagues in baseball. That was pretty clear. But I did have some lessons that I learned, as we called them at West Point, on those fields of friendly strife that were incredibly important for me and my development as a human being and as a professional. And so it is the purpose of a young person coming to the University of Montana is set them up for success over the rest of their life. It's not to win games. And I think we have to be very clear.
So for those of us that aren't familiar with how this would work within the university system, your vision is very positive and forward-thinking, and probably what most parents want to hear from a university president, myself included. So that being said, how do you ensure that your vision is implemented across the UM athletic department?
Well, I think it's by being very clear and stating my intentions, my expectations right up front. I mean, Bobby mentioned it, Kent has mentioned it. It's not the first time they've heard that. When I came here and met with all of our coaches and said, for me, I wanted them to have really 3 takeaways. One is the one I've already articulated, that ultimately these athletics programs are about developing leadership, character traits, teamwork in young people. 2, that the values of this university are often expressed through the front door of the university, which is often our athletics programs. And I expect all of our coaches and all of our student athletes to embody the values of yes, toughness, but class and professionalism and discipline on the fields, and to be examples of the values of this university to this community. And then the third piece is one that you hit on, which I think is a really important one, and that is that these young people that come and experience this important piece of their development, their education, they're learning those lessons in front of 30,000 people sometimes. And I think everyone in this room thinks back to when they were 18 or 19 and you think, oh my goodness, what a knucklehead. I can't believe that I did that. Or I really failed on that test. The young women and men that are in our programs, they do that with a huge audience. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember that. You know, I have one of my wife's good friends was a Lady Grizz player here 20 years ago. And she said, people still stop me in the grocery store and say, hey, I remember that game 20 years, you know. She's still a celebrity. And that's a weird thing to go through when you're 18, you're 19, you're 20. And I think it's really important for the grown-ups in this community to remember that underneath that helmet, underneath that softball jersey, is an 18-year-old kid going through a maturation process. And so I want our coaches to remember that. But I would tell you, we had some of our Grizzly Scholarship Association board meeting this week, and I told them that. And I'd encourage all this community to recognize that these are young women, young men in key development stages of their lives. And I think it's really important for us to support them through that.
Okay, this is an off-the-cuff question. I hope it's okay to ask you. So In hearing you say that then, how do you balance the demands of major donors who are looking for a winning football program versus implementing your vision, which clearly is not, putting winning at the top?
Well, like I said, I firmly believe that when you put those values of character, teamwork, of discipline, of hard work, of toughness, and of class and professionalism, when that's how you orient your organization, that's your North Star, wins follow. When you try to take shortcuts, you might win for a short period of time, not over the long run. The only way to build effective and excellent organizations is to focus on those values and drive toward those. Wins will follow.
Thank you. I'm going to let Bryn talk for a little bit. Sorry.
All right, Kent, this is for you, and Drew, for you as well on the broader spectrum of things. So I think most people in this room probably know that several years ago there was a DOJ and an NCAA investigation here in Missoula and on campus. What some people may not understand is that while those were happening at the same time, they were different investigations. So Kent, with that, since those investigations, athletics has instituted numerous positive changes across the board. Can you speak to those, what we've done to not only reduce sexual assaults on campus, but take ownership of the issues that were there to change them? Can you speak on the athletic side? And then Drew, I'd turn it over to you to speak on the university bigger picture.
Absolutely. I do think that's a key point, because we haven't talked about the NCAA investigation for so long, which is a good thing. Don't want to talk about that. But those came at the same time, but they were running on completely parallel tracks, never to cross. And I think people at times get those mixed up. But since that time, and I'm proud, I'm proud tonight. I don't think folks realize we have most of our head coaches sitting right here tonight with us. We felt like it was important enough for them to be here and to participate and to listen. And I appreciate them being here. One of, I think, the key things that we have done is revamping our student-athlete code of conduct. It's taken that discipline out of the hands of the head coaches, which does put those head coaches in difficult places. It does. When you're thinking about, I do need to win. I want to win. We're in this business. We want to win. We're competitive. But it allows a group that made up of myself, Jean Gee, our Senior Associate Athletic Director, and then 2 faculty members, our faculty athletic rep, who's a sociology professor, and then the chair of the University Athletic Committee, who's a professor as well, to deal with those discipline issues. I think for the head coaches, it's a relief because it allows them to not get bogged down in that area. So the student-athlete code of conduct, I think, is a great step forward. The other thing that is so critical for athletic departments to be successful in this area is to collaborate across campus. You have to not operate in a bubble. I think if you look at athletic issues that are so prevalent in the news and become so widespread and so well known, it's when athletic departments have tried to handle things in-house, and that just gets you into trouble. And so what I'm also very proud of is the collaboration that we have with Drew, with Jessica Weltman in the Title IX office, with our legal counsel, with our dean of students, with all of those campus partners that are professionals and that can deal with these type of things. At the core, our student athletes are students. And so involving them in all of those trainings that are mandatory for all students, and then putting that on top of student athlete training as well that we do with visiting, with guest speakers, with community service, with all those other things. The work is never done, and I think that's apparent because we're sitting here talking about this topic tonight, that the work is never done, and when you get complacent thinking it is, that's when you're setting yourself up for some failure. But I'm proud of bystander training, of training of our coaches on Title IX, on mandatory reporting, on understanding what your role is as a campus security authority, that you are to report if you hear these things, that you report to me and I go to Title IX, and it allows us to have these checks and balances and these policies and procedures in place that have become so more clearly defined and so much easier, I would say, to follow.
Drew, can you tell us a bit or a lot about what SARC actually has done and continues to do?
So I'll try to keep this as concise as possible because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has gone on, I'd say, since I think I started in 2011 or 2012. So, and like Kent mentioned, all of the accomplishments that we have made has been because of really passionate, hardworking individuals, both on our campus and in our community, that are just, you know, their heart and soul is put into this, and we're very dedicated to moving forward so that our, not just our campus, but our community is safe and inclusive for all. So as Kent mentioned, at the University of Montana, all incoming students that are new to our institution take bystander intervention training and sexual assault prevention training, and that is an in-person session with my staff. So we train all incoming students. So just to give you an idea of the amount of work that goes into that, just that one training, since June 1st, my outreach coordinator, Isaac La'a, has trained 3,040 students individually and has provided 160 individual trainings. So it is no small feat, but it's you know, what research has told us, and the work that I've been doing with the CDC, is that it is really important that students and community members get this information in person. It causes them to engage in a different way than they might with an online tutorial. And so that's a huge piece of the prevention work that our office does. And as Bobby sort of alluded, we also, incoming students to our institution, not only take that in-person training, they take an online tutorial called PETSA. It's kind of a fun acronym. It's personal empowerment through self-awareness, a mouthful. But that was developed by, in part by Dr. Christine Fiore, Dr. Beth Hubble, and Dr. Danielle Wozniak. And so that tutorial, again, talks to students about, you know, what are state laws around sexual assault, what is the university policy in regards to, we use the term sexual misconduct in our institution, what it goes into what rape culture is, how do you intervene, it kind of introduces the topic of bystander intervention, and then what resources are available to students should they need support and help. Students also take a program when they first enter as well called Alcohol EDU, and that program is really, again, focused on you know, safe alcohol use and overall safety. So students also take that course when they first enter the University of Montana. Just to give you an example of some of the other work that we do, because of course, you know, those are kind of specific. And when you think about what is really effective prevention work, is that it has to be multifaceted, and it has to come from a number of different places and a number of different techniques. So some example, an example of that might be this year, it's I think our second year doing this now, but we worked with our provost's office and for the curriculum and instruction course, where a lot of new students take that class. I think we taught over 600 students. We focused with them on the concepts of resiliency and engagement, right? So what is resiliency and engagement in a campus community? How do you create belonging? Unfortunately, nationally, what they're finding is people are becoming lonely, right? There's a loneliness epidemic. And so we're talking to our students about connecting early on. How do you reach out? How do you get involved with student groups? If you're struggling, if you're feeling depressed, anxious, what are some healthy coping mechanisms, and what resources are available to reach out to should you need help, right? So we really want to set that information out for them early on. We also created an initiative, I want to say back in 2012. It was reported in the Times article, which was very exciting. So it's been picked up nationally, but we have a program called Don't Cancel That Class, in which faculty and instructors have been just phenomenal, wonderful partners in this, where they can call my office and we will cover a class for them, and they can pick the topic, and topics really are around the idea of creating a safe and inclusive campus community for all, a deeper understanding of resources. I think one of our more popular ones is it's called First Responders. So what do you do if someone comes to you and discloses that they've experienced sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking, harassment, or discrimination? How do you respond? How do you respond in a compassionate way, and what resources can you connect them to? And so, with all of those efforts, and then of course I would love for Chantel to talk more about this, but we are privileged to work with Chantel and Kelly McGuire on the Make Your Move Missoula team, which has reached national and international attention, which is very exciting. So again, it's really trying to meet students where they're at. We're constantly relooking at our prevention plan. Like Bobby alluded to, each year we get new students with different backgrounds and different knowledge, and so really trying to meet those needs.
And that's, one thing that I thought about too that's so critical in this is in August of 2017, just recently, the NCAA, which is the governing board for college athletics, it's made up of member institutions, and it's the board that sets the legislation. In August of 2017, they passed a legislation that mandated that student athletes all be trained in these exact things that we've been training them on since 2013. And so it was such a confirmation that, okay, we are doing things that are appropriate, that are now being seen at a national level, that need to be dealt with. And so I was happy that was the case.
Yeah, so it really sounds like that the university is a leader actually now in this area, right? And it sounds like, especially with your direction and involvement with SARC, it's incredibly proactive. Yeah, so I wasn't gonna do this, but I really would like to see a show of hands in the audience. After listening to Drew and hearing how much work she has done through SARC to train college students, how many of you were aware that much education was going on for sexual assault prevention within the university? Okay, so have a hard time seeing. I mean, realistically, about 25%. So I think that it's really important for those of you that have heard this now to help share with the community that this is what is actually occurring on our campus. And I think you answered my next question, Kent, which was essentially one of the things that the university has been somewhat criticized for in the community is that there was this perception that you wanted a pat on the back for basically doing what you should have done in the first place. But it seems to me, or is it accurate, that the university has actually gone above and beyond what was required of it by the DOJ and NCAA?
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, I think it is, but I get nervous when you sit back and say, well, boy, we sure feel good about ourselves. We're doing great things. We don't ever want to do that. It is constantly top of mind. It is something that you think about all of the time. And I think Drew made such a great point, is the interesting thing about college athletics is we want them to graduate and move on. They don't sign lifetime contracts with us. We get them to where we want them to be, then they graduate, and we get new 18-year-olds in on the other side that are young and impressionable and have never been away from home, and they're in Missoula, and they're running out of that tunnel, or they're shooting in front of 16 or 10,000 people, or whatever it might be, and it's retraining. So as coaches, as administrators, there's times I catch myself saying, boy, I've said this 100 times at least. And then I think, but that young man or that young woman is hearing it for the first time. And I've got to make sure that I say it with the same amount of passion, the same amount of accountability, and continue to talk that same thing over and over again. So you feel good at times, like, oh, I'm glad that we've been training since 2013, but guess what? We got to start it again on March 1st and continue to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Man, you guys are like ripping right through our questions. We're having to cross them off because you're answering so comprehensively. So one piece of training that we do want to specifically ask about, and it's as it relates to student athletes and the perception of privilege and entitlement with some of the student athletes. So this, I'm not sure who to direct this question to. I'm just going to say it, and whoever has the best, who's most well-equipped to answer can do so. Do players receive education on how to handle their celebrity status and how that may impact their dating and/or sexual relationships?
No one's jumping in. Thought if I paused long enough. On that topic specific, it's woven in to a number of other trainings, I would say, but that's I think where the rubber hits the road, and that's a difficult. It's one of those unknowns of how someone will react when they're put into that situation. But I think all we can do is educate, hold accountable, and then talk openly and honestly about it. If you pretend it's not there, you're going to get into trouble. And I tell our student athletes that all the time and say, if you aren't ready to deal with the celebrity status that comes with being here, right or wrong, earned or not deserved, it's best that you don't come here, because there's a lot of other places you can go and melt right into the background and not be nearly as a focal point of what goes on. But that's what makes this place so unique and so special, is that passion, but then teaching them the perspective. So I don't know if I answered that specifically, but yeah, Drew.
Yeah, so I think you did talk about that, and you know, hopefully I don't put you on the spot, Bobby, but you know, Bobby invited Isaac and I in last Friday to meet with the football team, you know, and that was one of the themes that we talked about was, you know, of course, Isaac and I took a cultural approach. So we talked about the way of the warrior and what that means in Native American culture. And then Isaac talked about it for what it means in Hawaiian culture, right? And so it's that idea of you look out for one another, you make sacrifices for the greater good, that you're a part of this family, you are a part of a community, and you are accountable to that community just as we're accountable, right? So it's that idea of the collective, and I just heard a little bit of your talk, but you know, it sounded like you were you know, speaking to them, you know, in that same way of what you're setting out your expectations around that. And then I do want to give Jean Gee, who is our assistant athletic director and does like phenomenal work, and I think really connects with our student athletes. She and I are going to continue to collaborate because one of the changes with the NCAA is that athletes are going to get trained every year now, right? So we're going to have to get really creative and thoughtful, and you know, keep bringing in, you know, interesting topics. One of the things I had talked to Jean about is I would love for athletes to be able to write in questions anonymously, and to set up a safe environment where, it's like, let's talk about these hard topics, and talk with myself and my staff, and try to answer those. And I know Jean has some great ideas moving forward, in bringing in a national speaker, and so there are a lot of things in the works, that again, like we were saying before, it can't just be one type of training. It has to be coming at it from multiple angles and from different people and from role models. Like Bobby said, he's seen as a role model, and so he's, when he's meeting with his team, that's something he has, that's the message he's got to send to his team, is that, these are our core values, and I hold you to these, right? So, so I look at this as a very collaborative approach, and something that, like Ken said, we'll continue to work on, and it's not going away ever, right?
So we are going to have to continue to move our questions along sort of quickly, because it's now at 8:05, and we really need to transition into the topic of what accountability the community as a whole has in terms of sexual assault prevention. So we're not looking at it specifically as just a university issue, and Lisa Davies' voice is very critical in that conversation. So we do want to cover one more topic with university. I'm almost feeling you guys could do a whole nother like press conference or forum on the leadership that you've exhibited in terms of sexual assault prevention. But thank you for the overview there. But I think we probably should briefly touch upon the work that Dr. Fiore has done.
Yes, so with that, I think both Kent and Drew and President Bodner have talked about sustained commitment to this. So with that, we'd like to address the Safe Campus Climate Survey that was done by Dr. Fiore. Dr. Fiore, will you please provide us a synopsis of what the Safe Campus Climate Survey is, and when it was done, and why it's important?
Okay, so we did the Safe Campus Survey under my development and consultation with national level people in 2013, 14, and 15, and we will also do it again in the fall. But you should know this campus has done surveys before for the same reason. These surveys are done to get an idea of behavior, attitudes, knowledge, and experiences, and to be able to organize programs like Drew's so that they meet student needs. If we are teaching things at this level and students have knowledge at this level, we miss, okay? So we need to do those. But what's interesting that I noticed from this discussion is that in 2007, Dustin Hollist, who is what? Okay, so the faculty athletic rep that you referred to, Dustin Hollist actually ran a climate survey at that time, and we actually compared data from 13, 14, and 15 to what he learned in 2007. We do this not just to guide Drew, but for us to learn what's happening on our campus. It's a voluntary survey. It's, we try to motivate students to take it voluntarily by offering prizes, because why do you want to take a survey like this as an average student? You really don't. So we actually have been consulted by other national groups, including our national consultants, on how we were so effective at getting students to participate. So we have really decent participation. We've learned a lot, and it's allowed us to modify and customize our resources, our programs, to learn things. Students, we have not just questions with forced choice, but we have opportunities for students to tell us what's going on, so that they may tell us things that we didn't know about, so that we can respond to and modify our programs, our actions, our education for faculty and staff, and anything happening on campus related to relationship violence. It really is an important aspect of guiding what we do from here on out. And we'll keep it up because it's really important, and this problem isn't going away.
Thank you for that explanation as to that climate survey, and thank you for the work that you've done revolving around that. So, President Bodnar, I have a follow-up question for you regarding that. Given the importance of that work, are you in a position to ensure that this survey will continue to happen and receive the funding necessary?
Yeah, look, we're going to make sure that we appropriately fund our efforts in this area. This is an important priority for the university.
And then, of course, we hear university administration, all of you talking about how important sexual assault prevention is. And so, question for you, do you have members of your cabinet that represent these interests?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We have Jessica Weltman, our Title IX coordinator, is here in the audience. Obviously, Kent, from an athletics standpoint, is here as also officially on the cabinet. Drew's work, together as part of our overall student affairs efforts, falls under our vice president for student affairs. Obviously, Lucy France, our chief legal counsel. So this is a holistic issue that frankly, it's a campus-wide issue that multiple members of our cabinet are engaged in.
Okay, so you're surrounding yourself with those people that also place a premium on these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people who work, I think this is an important point to remember, the people that have decided to dedicate their lives to the vocation of education, I call it a vocation, because it is, and these are people who are focused on the development of young women and men through a pretty formative period in their lives. So people don't come into this line of work, whether it's what Chris does in the classroom, what Kent does, what our provost does. They care about the development of young people. And so this is something that every campus across the country, frankly, every community, every sector of society is wrestling with. And I tell you, the people that sit around the table and have these discussions take this very, very seriously and are looking for the best interests of the young women and men that come to the University of Montana.
Okay, so to that end, Missoula Rises has a direct ask, not of you or of the university, but actually of Governor Bullock. And we are going to be writing him and contacting him to discuss this direct ask. And we would ask that Governor Bullock appoint a regent who also represents these interests, such as a behavioral health specialist or someone of that nature, who can directly represent the interests that the university has made a priority. So we would also ask that the governor follow the university's lead in making this a priority in terms of leadership. So, okay, your turn.
We're ready to move?
Yeah. We're ready to move on into the community aspect of this.
Right. So, Lisa, tell us about your experience with the petition and what occurred afterward on some online fan forums.
Yeah, thanks, Bryn. So I think most of the people in the audience probably are aware that after I wrote the petition and tweeted it out, I quickly learned how vile Twitter can be, and somebody by the name of Alpha Grizz 1 started to kind of throw threats at me. And then in addition to being threatening online, he attempted to dox me. And what I've discovered also is that a lot of people don't know what doxing is. And doxing is something that happens in online communities where you get other people to harass with you. And so it's not just you harassing or bullying somebody, it's asking other people to do it alongside of you. And it includes publishing somebody's personal information and asking people to directly threaten them, including potential physical violence, and certainly threats of it. He attached a hashtag #DoxParty, which is something that's followed by online trolls. And so it greatly amplified the threat. When that happened, I then went and looked at some of the online forums because he was an owner of one. And so I discovered maroonblood.com. And I know several of the people in the audience have membership to that site. I also know that maroonblood.com is kind of a sideways site for people who get kicked off of eGriz. I also, though, encountered a lot of vile opinions on eGriz when the petition came out. And so there has been some debate on that forum, and rightly so. People denounced what Alpha did, and certainly the university and the athletics department did, which was great. But there were other people on egress who were saying things too, and I brought a few of them with me because I didn't want to say them wrong. Let me get to it.
And so these are from eGriz or Maroon Blood?
These are from eGriz. So, holy shit, God bless her husband or boyfriend. That is a gift sent directly from God to be able to deal with this drama queen. This is a woman who is miserable, in all caps, all the time, about everything, every single day. And just to be clear, I'm not miserable, and I'm not miserable to be around. And then somebody replies, let's be real, she's a muff diver. And it doesn't matter what my sexuality is, but that's definitely a homophobic comment on top of a sexist comment. And then somebody replies, she's probably a state fan, right? Let's dig in with the Bobcats. And then somebody else says, she's all yours, pal. I looked at her Facebook page, but nice try, knucklehead. And for those of you who don't do gender studies, this completely, it's a sexist comment, a homophobic comment, and then treats me as property, right? That I'm somebody who's not sexually valuable, and so I can belong to somebody else. And women are not sexual objects. So this is just one that I pulled off of eGriz, and there are many. And it's a good, in 4 exchanges, 4 things we don't want to see in the fan base.
Okay, so to be clear, and either you can answer this or the university can, is eGriz operated or owned or affiliated with the University of Montana?
So when this happened, they were very clear to point out they do not own this site. It is fan-owned, but it is my personal opinion that they could do more to regulate things that say Grizz, or very clearly use proximities of their logos.
And when you say they, you mean the university could do things to regulate?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So when the university does discover this type of fan behavior, and before I get to that, I also want to point out that, Drew, in our prior conversations, you indicated that you also, in the past, either yourself or knew of other people that were subject to those same types of sexist comments on eGriz, correct? Okay. Yes? Okay. So the university, you feel, has a duty to intervene or help regulate that fan behavior, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, too, there's a good example of this. When they came out ahead at the press conference and condoned the behavior, eGriz behavior shaped up a little bit. When I go back and look at that forum, people were very careful to distance themselves from the type of behavior that Alpha displayed. And so that's one example of how they were able to leverage their power to interact with fans.
We condemned it, not condoned it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you used condoned there, and
Thank you for
hair on
catching
the back
that.
of my
I
neck
definitely
kinda
meant
stood
condemned.
up. So yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't mean to step in. I just wanted to clarify on that.
No, and go ahead, Kent, because I think it's important. I mean, and I think both Bobby and Kent very clearly at the press conference right after these events that there is no place for this type of behavior. There is no place for harassment. There is no place for threatening behavior. That has no place in Grizz athletics. And I think we can't say that, we can't be any more clear about that than we have been. And I think we will continue to do that. We'll continue to lead by example in terms of how we comport ourselves. We can't control the behavior, the speech of every individual that are fans or not fans. But I think we need to be very clear, and have been, and will continue to be, that there's no place for this type of behavior.
Right, and I mean, I feel like we should just point out the obvious here too, that there is only so much the university can do. You do have leverage and you do have power, and that should be exercised when appropriate. But that's really where the community conversation component of this comes in. We, as a community, and also NCAA, has high expectations and standards and requirements for university athletes, that they are not engaging in this type of speech, this type of behavior. So now we need to look at ourselves as a community and examine what duty do we have, what role do we play in this conversation as well to be good mentors for student athletes. So to that end, I know there are many people that participate in the eGRIS forum, and it's true that not all, and not even close to all of the fans behave that way or talk that way. But I will put this forth to you that when you see that behavior occurring on eGRIS, instead of replying off of it with like a laugh face emoji or just being silent, you have a responsibility to step in as a bystander and say, this is not okay. Whether you agree with Lisa's position or not, or whatever is being said on there, it's your individual responsibility to also stand up and say, this is not okay. And that's how we start to change this culture that Drew was saying is really community-wide. It is not specific to the university, but it's incumbent upon all of us to step in as bystanders and stop it. So eGRIS members, if you are not stepping in and stopping it when you see it, then you're complicit. You are complicit in that behavior. And if you are embarrassed by that behavior, then you need to step in. And Chantel can speak to this, but it literally takes, what, one person to step in?
Yes, there's some good studies on this. So one study that was looking at how do you interrupt sexist and racist comments, and it was focused on men in a room together. They had one guy come in and start making jokes, and most of the men in the room looked a little uncomfortable but stayed silent. And they ran this over and over again, and over again they stayed silent. And then they ran the experiment again by putting a plant in the room whose job was to say, I don't want to hear that here. That's all he had to say. And then all the other guys who had been uncomfortable the whole time started saying, yeah, no, me neither. You need to knock that off. And that speaks to that mentorship and leadership. So one voice can change the dialogue. And there's other ways that our community can take leadership on this issue too. The Missoulian used to get awful comments every time they had a story that was around sexual or domestic violence or how that interfaced with university at all. And just in our office, we had a mantra, don't read the comments because they're just terrible. At some point, the Missoulian recognized that this was not beneficial to our community, that this is not civil discourse. It doesn't change hearts and minds. It doesn't do anything other than add that level of toxicity to the conversation. And they ended comments online because they were anonymous. And it shifted everything to Facebook. On Facebook, you can still make terrible comments, but you're not anonymous. So you have to own your comments. So I love free speech, but I think you should be responsible for your speech.
Which frankly could be another direct ask of the owner of the eGRIS site. I believe his name is Chris Lynn. I mean, frankly, that owner should require that all posters post under their real names. I run a site for Missoula Rises. People don't get anonymous names there. We don't post anonymously. You use your words wisely and you use them intentionally. Your words mean something, and when you have to have your personal name in front of it, you're a lot more careful about what you say. So that's a direct ask that we would have of the eGRIS fan forum. And those fans of you that are embarrassed by this, maybe you make that request of that fan forum as well, that there be no more anonymous posting.
Kent, I think it's important that we all acknowledge how do you learn and grow and get better with things. Sometimes, unfortunately, it takes a horrific situation. This petition brought up some awful feelings and people doing just things that are unacceptable. As we've said, we do not, that's not okay. But with that, we've been able to learn. And can you talk a little bit about a couple minor, well, they're big, but things we're doing to address that?
Sure. We're adding language on the back of our tickets, and I know that sounds small, but it's language that allows us to revoke tickets and allows us to do things with fans. We police those football games pretty closely and have a way for folks to share. There's behavior around me that's inappropriate. Come help me. We've got a lot of ways of going to do that. Chuck Mays in our operations area spends a lot of time making sure that environment's a fan-friendly and a good environment to be in. But certainly adding language on tickets, it allows us to revoke those tickets. And also we publish a fan etiquette guideline that goes in all of our season tickets. And holding ourselves accountable, and again, passion with perspective. I think is so critical to this. We licensing and the use of marks, that falls under our licensing area, but boy, we are constantly policing that, watching for that. If there's a misuse of logos, if there's insinuating affiliation, we go after that pretty severely.
Yeah, so let's see. We are going to transition now into some questions actually that arose on the eGRIS forum. So to be fair here, we solicited questions from both Missoula Rises members, from the general public, and then also we specifically wanted to request some from the eGRIS fan forum, so we had sort of balanced questions. And one question that came up repeatedly was for Lisa. This is from the eGRIS forum. And it was very upsetting to a lot of fans, the fact that when you did the petition itself contained an image of John Krakauer's book, Missoula, and you photoshopped an image of Bobby Houck's face onto that book.
It was actually just text.
It was
just
text.
his name. Yeah.
Okay. First, do you acknowledge that Coach Houck nor his tenure as a coach was discussed in that book?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us why you chose to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did have some discussion about whether or not we needed to go backwards a little bit and visit this question, but it was clear that a lot of you really wanted to hear the answer. As I mentioned before, there were multiple player arrests and incidents during Bobby's first tenure. And what we've also learned here is that sexual assault and the culturation of that does not happen overnight. Becoming the public face of that does not happen overnight. It was years of power and entitlement and arrests and partner assaults and making national news for being a bully. To those of you who very specifically, Jack Manning, I'll just call you out, who said there were no reported rapes during Houck's tenure, I really want to remind you that no data was kept. So we don't know whether they happened or not, and there were many barriers to reporting. We've talked about how when people are in positions of power, it's much harder for people to come forward. And so if you're an 18-year-old or 19-year-old girl on campus and you've been assaulted, and you've just watched the head football coach yell at some student reporters for asking about another assault, that's a barrier to reporting. The arrests read like a list of escalating incidences, including domestic and partner assault, that demonstrate power the same way rape is used to exercise power. The fact that as soon as Houck left, women started reporting rapes, I think can demonstrate the potential power a coach holds to create an environment whether or not it's safe to report. I also want to say that none of us are blaming Sheila or Seth for the current state of the university. And while I disagree with how Pflugrad handled the sexual assaults, I personally felt he was left a mess to clean up, including stopping initiation parties that Houck allowed to have happen. And so for me, when I thought about Houck coming back, I really saw this downward spiral where we had 14 arrests in 3 years, and 12 of those were when he was coach. And so for me, it was kind of this culminating, we had this horrible, tumultuous time as a community, and then we had this horrible book. And I don't mean that the book was horrible, but for the community, it was sad. And it very effectively communicated my concerns very quickly, and it certainly gathered attention.
So to be fair, John Krakauer, who authored the book, did his research and did his investigation, and he did not clearly deem there to be a connection between Coach Houck and what had occurred in the book. Is that correct?
Well, I think also when you're writing a book, you're going to look at scope, and he was really focused on the Johnson trial. He wasn't focused on the last decade at the university.
Okay. So do you stand by your decision to have associated Coach Houck with John Krakauer's book?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that it's fair, so it's a balanced discussion. Coach Houck, would you like to respond to Lisa's statements?
Not really. I'm just, I've done this a long time. I'm used to people taking their shots, and it kind of goes with the job a little bit, and you just accept it and do your best and keep doing it.
So to that end, Lisa, how do you feel now after you have heard the efforts that the university has taken and Coach Hauk's commitment to moving forward? How are you feeling about the state of affairs?
So I think the university has done an incredible amount of work, and I really want to say that to Drew. I really recognize everything you're doing, and to athletics. I recognize things that are happening on campus. I definitely get concerned when I hear you ask Coach Hauk what he specifically does. He's talked about how he's a father figure and a role model for these young people, but initially, essentially it's left up to the school system from what I directly heard him say. And so I hope that, that you're really able to think about that and your role, because certainly myself as a parent, I don't depend on the community and the school system to fully educate the behavior of my children. I want them to be a really important part of it, and I want it to be a good system, but certainly I have a role in that as well. So I hope that that gets looked at.
And Coach Hauk, do you want to take the opportunity to clarify or expand upon what you are specifically doing for your athletes in response to that?
I mean, we stand by the fact that we're developing men of character. They're going to be great husbands, fathers, and community members going out the door. That's our goal. That's our mandate from our president. That's what we've always done in this program.
So, what I really hope comes out of this, beyond everyone understanding what the university has already done, and hopefully eGRIS and the fans really thinking about how their behavior impacts the community and the players, is to understand things like saying that rape is bad and I don't condone it, and I don't want it to happen to my family, is not really enough. That we really need to educate ourselves about the bigger picture of what leads to sexual assault and sexual misconduct.
So in moving the discussion forward, now that we've been able to address those concerns that have been brought up by eGRIS fans and other fans and even the athletic department in terms of your use of that book, I mean, it seems like we've had a pretty productive conversation here today. How do you feel, and how do you feel, Coach Hauk, in terms about us moving forward collectively towards the bigger issue of preventing sexual assault and violence?
Well, obviously, this is an important topic, and we came here for a reason. I appreciate being here to be part of constructive dialogue on something that is epidemic in every corner of our country and every aspect of our lives. I mean, I've got daughters. I also have a son that's college age. I care. I want them in a safe environment, like all parents do. But it's important to have civil discourse, as was mentioned a minute ago, and we have to be able to do that sort of thing, and we can't just throw bombs at people. We need to have actual civil discourse and come up with solutions and results. And I think that doing things such as this speak volumes. I mean, we all came here of our own volition tonight. This is not a university-sanctioned event. We're here because we're the same reason I chose to come back to Missoula, is I think this is a great place. It's my hometown. It's where I want my kids to be, and I think having the ability to discuss, once again, a topic that is epidemic all over our country, probably in Hollywood is the epicenter of it at this point. It's not exclusive to Missoula, the University of Montana, or college athletics. It's rampant everywhere, and awareness is a great step forward.
And thank you for saying that. And then as we all sit here, I mean, we can have divergent opinions and not agree with each other, but it seems to me that the common thread here is that in terms of looking at overall community behavior, we all stand on the same page together that using the kind of language that's been included in eGRIS and Maroon Blood and other forums is completely and totally unacceptable to everyone on this panel. Yes? Yeah. And,
Yes.
you know, especially even Coach Hauk and Lisa Davey here, I mean, you two don't agree, but you both stand together in solidarity on the fact that, Bobby, you reject that type of fan behavior, those kind of comments directed at Lisa, even though you may not agree with her, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we covered that in the press conference, or I did. But, you know, I've never been in a chat room, all right? And I don't consider it a real valid forum, but you know, I believe in civil discourse. As I mentioned, it doesn't reside there. I mean, I don't think it should ever be expected there. It's just not going to happen. That's not a real world type want. And if I had advice for people that are choosing to go there it would be to be civil to one another, just like we should if we're out on the street here. But you know, my main advice is, why would you ever go in there? It's toxic, and frankly, it's a waste of time to go into those. I mean, it's an it's a football-based forum. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's a sport. It's a game, and you know, frankly, I don't go in there because they're not very good to me either.
No. And I actually, so I have a couple of things I'd like to follow up with on that. Right before I came here, I went and grabbed a little bit of dinner, and the wait person is a former Grizz player. And he told me too, he said, you know, the new recruits will come in and they say, oh my gosh, I just saw this thing on eGrizz, and they have to be told, like, don't go there, don't look at it. Like, it's also not very kind to players. Brent, unfortunately, could not be here tonight. And so I would disagree that civil discourse can't happen online. Brent and I were able to have a really good conversation. I didn't know him at all before this happened. And he stepped in as a bystander, continued to step in as a bystander, sent me a supportive message and said, hey, we're not all like this. And not just not all people, I'm gonna do something about it. And we talked. He disagreed with the help cover, and I explained my reasoning, and he explained why he didn't like it. And then we said, okay, we've heard each other out, and we're not going to agree. And then we were able to move forward and talk really about how we both loved the Grizz, and we both loved going to games, and how we would really like to see the culture there improve. And so I think it's entirely possible to have that happen. And really, a couple of forum members have really been working hard to create a space for civil discourse. I think the other really important thing that Coach Hawk said is that those forums are supposed to be about football and basketball. They're not about trash talking people. And so Brent has told me a couple times, I go there to talk sports. I don't go there to diss on people.
Yeah, I want to second that about Brent Wahlberg. He unfortunately is very sick tonight with some complications with the influenza, so he couldn't join us, but he was actually the representative to be on the panel from eGrizz. And he really does embody the type of personality that we should be emulating as adults and community members. I mean, he's got 1 foot in Missoula Rises, 1 foot in eGrizz. He's so able to navigate those conversations and to set a positive example within those chat rooms that if you see, he uses his real name, he doesn't post anonymously. I mean, truly, if you're in there and you see him, you should give him a shout out, or at least look at him and try and follow his lead, because it's people like Brent that are actually going to change this culture that we've been talking about. So we're fortunate to have him as a community member. Okay, we are running overtime. However, we still are going to wrap up. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here, and especially our panelists. This feels like a pretty big deal for Missoula Rises to be included in a conversation like this and to bring it forth to the community. Our sincere hope is that we're able to all leave this panel today to move forward and to work together with the university, realizing that we're all one community. They're not separate and distinct from us and vice versa, but we need to support each other in moving forward to dismantle the rape culture and to deal with the toxic masculinity. So we're excited to be partners in moving forward with you, and more importantly, we really hope by having these hard conversations and by Lisa being able to address the issue with the book that we're able to leave it here. They've been discussed, Bobby's heard it, they're sitting next to each other, did not devolve into Jerry Springer, so they're okay with leaving it here. We hope that the community is okay with leaving it here now too. We really want to be forward thinking in terms of this subject matter. So I will stop talking, and we would like to have President Bodner conclude with his thoughts.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming for this important discussion. I want to thank all of our panelists. This is not easy to stand up in front of people, in front of cameras, and talk about difficult issues. But the issue of sexual assault and more broadly sexual harassment is something that, as we've said, I think multiple times tonight, that every single campus and every single community across this country is dealing with. I think it's a good thing that we've seen discussions about this, painful as they may be, especially over the past year, really start to come to the fore. This is an issue with which our community, and I say our city, our university, has a tough history. But I think what's really important to recognize is the hard work of Drew, of Chris, of Jean, of the dozens of others out there, of Chantel, who have worked so hard to make UM, to create the policies that have enabled people to refer to the University of Montana as the, quote, gold standard for policies of education, of training, of prevention, response around the issue of sexual assault. And I think it's been a good chance and opportunity, I think, to discuss some of that work. I want to be clear, though, that this work, as we've said multiple times, is never done. In fact, tomorrow afternoon we have our UCSA meeting. So tomorrow afternoon we'll be spending 2 hours with our University Council on Student Assault, talking through, all right, how are we doing? What are we doing to improve? How are we going to track our progress in this area? We, as we've said, have thousands, and we're hoping to have a lot more thousands of young people that come through this campus every year. And as Kent, I think, said, you forget that this is an 18-year-old walks in and they have, they haven't had some of this. I didn't have this when I was in college. I didn't have this education. Most of us in this room didn't. And so, this work never stops. We're never going to be perfect, but we're always going to be working and doing everything we can. And I would tell you that the educators from the University of Montana, and I'll call them all educators, whether they're an athletic director, a professor like Chris, a coach, I see Travis right there, these are educators. They've committed their lives to shaping young people. And as a city that has a university as a key part of it, we're all part of that too. And I thank you for the discussion, and I thank you for the active listening. And I ask for your help and your partnership as we move forward and as we address these types of issues head on. And I just want to thank this group and look forward to the continued partnership moving forward.